Hello, and welcome to the first in a couple of the recorded lectures from the Learning Enhancement and Academic Development Service, more commonly known as Leeds. My name is Andrew Struan and I am one of the staff in Leeds. What we're going to talk about over the next couple of these lecture recordings is approaching academic writing and approaching essay writing at university level. So what we're going to talk about is, firstly, why we write essays at all. Then secondly, some of the core and key components of essay writing. And then thirdly, an approach to essay strategy. So this first recording will cover the kind of higher level components of what it is that we're looking for you to do. In future recordings, we'll talk about things like criticality and argumentation and building references. So, why do we write essays? We write essays for a number of different reasons. They're not just, I promise, to torture you. We write essays to display our knowledge. That seems fairly self-obvious and self-explanatory, but your essays are your place and your space for you to show off how much you know, how much you've learned, and how much you understand the topic. From a marker's perspective, what this means is, when we look at your work, we can see the ways in which you have structured, approached, written, and answered the essay question. And we can see the ways in which your approach to that essay question and the ways in which you answer that essay question display your understanding of the topic. In other words, the way in which you write your essay, the comfort with which you approach that topic, the ability with which you engage with the sources, the discussion, all allow the marker to see your knowledge, your understanding, and your ability to grasp the concepts that are under discussion in the class. The essays also allow you to explore subjects in much more depth. So the way in which I tend to look back on this is the topics that I remember from my own undergraduate, which was not yesterday, are the topics about which I wrote essays. The essays are the space that you have to explore your subject in depth, in detail, and to really get to grips with the topics under discussion. And then, the one that we'll be talking about today is to provide this clear and logical discussion on a topic. So we're looking for you to showcase to us that you can build clear, logical, engaging discussion around about a core topic. And then lastly, your essays are your chance to present, to explain, and to defend a coherent line of argument. And we'll talk about that in a later recording. So what do we mean by this? Well, the way in which most people are taught to write in school or in college is what's called a relevance model of writing. And this relevance model of writing is where you focus, as the author of your essay, you focus on organising other people's information. Professor X said Y, Professor Z said 1, Professor K says 2. Your thoughts, your interpretations, your understandings are therefore not at the forefront of your writing. What you're doing essentially in this model of writing, this relevance model of writing, is organising other people's thoughts, other people's work. And therefore, the development of meaning, the critique of concepts, and importantly, your voice, the things that you have to say about a topic, are not central to the essay's work. And so, if you write in this relevance form of writing, then building a conclusion is a really difficult thing to do. If your essay says Professor X says 1, Professor Y says 2, and Professor Z says 3, the only conclusion you can draw there is to say, so, in conclusion, Professor X said 1, Professor Y said 2, and Professor Z said 3. That's boring. What we're interested in then at university level is what's called cogency in writing. Cogency in writing is where you focus on engagement with meaning, with concepts, and with ideas. That's what university life is all about. It's about engaging with meaning, concept, and ideas. Your essay then becomes structured around this development and this critique of meaning, this development and critique of idea. And we do that through the development and the building of an argument. And we'll talk about that in a later recording. So that development of an argument is the piece of writing that you put together that is unique to you, that showcases your understanding. And all of that is based on empirical research. All of that is based on data, on evidence, on information. So how do we then go from this kind of relevant style of writing into cogency in writing? And what does that mean? Well, the first step and the most important step at this level is to think about actually answering the essay question. And I know that sounds plainly obvious, but the number of times that I've seen essays where the student has misunderstood the essay question or has chosen to answer, for whatever reason, an entirely random other different essay is far too many. So what the essay questions are looking to do is to challenge you on a particular topic or a particular discussion. So in order to get this right, there are 3 key elements in understanding what your essay question is asking you to do. Firstly, you have command words. These command words are the things that tell you what to do, how to interpret the essay question. So the things that you're being asked to do. So compare and contrast, discuss, analyze. How is a command word. Should is a command word because they're telling you to investigate the concepts. You then have the subject, which is the wider, broader topic under discussion. This tends to be one of the bigger, broader topics that will be discussed or interpreted or analysed in your lectures and maybe your seminars and tutorials, but they will be a topic that is too big and too broad for you to write a coherent essay question on. So what you then have is the focus. And the focus is the specific lens through which you investigate, you analyse and you interpret that broader subject. So the focus is the way in which you understand that broader subject. So if we think back to what it is we're looking for you to do in essays, to that display your knowledge and to explore a subject in more depth, then what we have here is your ability to explore that broader subject in more depth through the lens and through the specifics of the focus. Okay, so if we look at some examples. Okay, so remember we've got command words, we've got subjects, and we've got focuses. So if we say how and why, so that's our command words. So how does this happen and why? So what is it that's significant about this? Does Voltaire satirize philosophical optimism in Candide? Okay, so what we've got here is the bigger, broader topic, Candide, right? You wouldn't really generally be asked to write an essay just about that, right? There's no focus here, there's no specifics through which you can analyze that wider topic. So what you're given then is this focus of topic, okay, that philosophical optimism. So what the essay question is asking you to do here is show your understanding firstly of the subject, but then apply that understanding of the subject through the focus. Okay, so what your essay would do in this case is look at this concept of philosophical optimism and look at Candide and see the ways in which we can understand philosophical optimism and have a greater understanding of Candide by marrying those 2 discussions together. Okay. And the trap that students will fall into here is either going down the path of just telling us a story about Candide or going down the path of telling us a story about philosophical optimism, but that's not what this essay question is looking for you to do. Okay, so you analyse that bigger, broader subject through the prism, through the lens of the focus. Okay. Then again, let's look at another example. So with reference to the 2 films covered in this course, analyse to what extent these films present either clear or ambiguous messages about the worlds they represent. Okay, so again, it's the same as before. The command words are fairly obvious, analyse to what extent. But the subject here are the films from the course. Okay, again, you probably wouldn't be able to write an essay just about the films in this course. Or if you did, it would be a story. There would be no critical evaluation, there would be no attempt to investigate and discuss what was happening. Okay, so what you're given then is this focus, and it's this clear or ambiguous messages about the world they represent. So what this essay question is asking you to do is investigate and show off your knowledge of this broader subject, the films, through this focus, through this prism of discussion. So that then instead of just having a story about what happens in the films, you have an investigative and an analytical discussion around about the messages and the worlds that they represent. Okay, so let's look at one last example here. Again, the command words, to what extent do you agree that Mafalda offers an emblematic representation of the middle class? Right. What you've got here, again, is that bigger, broader subject, Mafalda. Again, though, what we don't want is a story. So we don't want a summary of what happens. We don't want a step-by-step breakdown of what happens. No. Instead, we want you to pick apart this emblematic representation of the middle class, get to the core root of what that concept means, and then apply it to the text. So what you have then is that ability to show off that knowledge, to show off what things mean, thinking back to that cogency in writing, and then to apply it to a text, a film, or anything else under discussion. Okay, and one of the key features of university writing then is this ability to take concepts, to take discussions and apply them in different sets of circumstances. So apply them to different texts, apply them to different films. Okay, so what we then have is approaches that we take in order to do this. The first thing and the important thing to think about is, what's the point of the question? What is the essay question asking you to do? And we do that, we understand that by going through that subject, that focus, and those command words. So the point of the question is to be able to analyse that broader, bigger subject through the analysis of the focuses. Okay. Then you think, okay, I have my subject, I have my focus, I understand the point of what it is I'm meant to do. The next question after that is, well, how do I answer that question? Okay, and we'll come on to that in a second. But you start to think about that answer to the question by thinking about, well, what material, what information, what discussion do I have or do I need to have in order to be able to get to that answer? So what would be appropriate and relevant material? And then what are all the areas of the question? So if you go back to thinking about the focus that you were looking at there, the focus will normally have a couple of different areas, a couple of different discussion points, themes, topics, categories. And your essay should engage with all of those themes, topics, and categories in some way in order to be able to make sure that your analysis of that broader subject is complete. So the way in which we do this then is by thinking about evidence and by thinking about theory. And what we do in the arts and social sciences is join evidence and theory together to provide this overarching discussion that molds together evidence, facts, texts with how we understand the application of those texts through theory. Okay, so you will have here evidence, which can be the product of systematic or rigorous research. So in this case, it might be a close reading or an analysis of a primary source, of analysis of a text. And then we might have a theory, which is the material that we use, the discussion, the academic discussion that we use to build up our understanding of those pieces of evidence. So if we go back to thinking about how this works in that subject focus model, we might have that the broader subject is the evidence, the primary source, the text that you are looking at. So we're looking for information from that text. But then we're also looking for concepts, frameworks, understandings through the prism of that focus in order to be able to understand what that evidence says, what it does, and how it works. So if we think about then starting this as a process, first things to do here are don't start with just reading a roundabout a text. If you're reading a roundabout a text, all you'll find is that your reading list will continually expand. There's always more reading to be done than you have time to do. So start by trying to have as focused an approach to your reading as possible. And this comes from asking questions of the essay question. And the initial questions can be really, really simple. Well, what does that concept mean? So what does philosophical optimism mean? Where does this apply? So perhaps when was this under discussion? Where was this under discussion? Where in the text does this happen? When in history does this happen? When does this debate come through? Why is this the case? Who says this? And these can be really basic initial questions, but getting the answers to those questions, you will then find prompts further, more detailed questions. So then you might have, well, in what way is that said? In what way is that proven? So says who? What academic argues this, and why are they saying it that way? Do they have a theory here, an interpretation that underlines the point that they're making? And then what evidence do they have to prove that? How is that proven? So what we then have from that is that you can take these questions and use them to guide your reading. So questions give your reading that purpose and that focus as to what it is that you are looking for in your reading. What you then have is answers to those questions, hopefully. Some of the times, maybe not always, but hopefully we get at least some kind of pathway towards an answer. And those questions can then be grouped. So you might have that there are similar theories or similar discussion points or a pattern in the discussion. You might have maybe that, I don't know, for example, in the 1960s, all of the academics spoke about a particular text in one way, and then in the 1980s that kind of shifted and there's this new discussion around about a particular text and so on. What you then have there are themes or topics in your answer. And what we're looking for in your writing then is your ability to understand that bigger, broader subject through that focus and to use those themes or those topics in your answer in order to show off to the marker that you understand that bigger, broader subject and you understand the various elements of how you get to that analysis through that focus. So what you might have then is something that looks essentially like this topic-based approach. So you've got your overall essay question, you then have those different topics that have come out of your questions, and then underneath that you might have evidence, which may be a quote from your text, from your primary source, and you may have a theory that explains and tells us how we understand that piece of evidence through an academic discussion, through a theory. Okay. So what we're doing here is we're saying, okay, I've got this evidence and this evidence will probably relate to that bigger, broader subject. And then we've got this theory, this discussion, and that will probably relate to how we're analysing that bigger, broader subject. So that will probably relate to our focus. Okay. And what you might have then is that, say, for example, underneath topic 1, you might have one piece of evidence, you might have 5 pieces of evidence, you might have five pieces of evidence, but then also still one theory that explains all those pieces of evidence. Okay, so it's not always about just saying, okay, I've got one quote and I've got one reference from an academic text, therefore my topic is done. That may not be enough. Okay, and the way to think about this is to think about, do you have enough information under any one of the topics to prove the point that you're talking about? Okay, to prove the argument that you're putting forward. And that's what we'll come on to in the next recording. So, just a reminder then, what we're looking for you to do is, firstly, display your knowledge. Secondly, explore that subject in more depth. And then also, as we spoke about here, provide that clear and logical discussion on a topic. And then we're also looking for you to present, to explain, and defend an argument. And we'll come on to that next.